Hi, and welcome back to AppSecCon 2022. In this panel discussion, we're going to be talking about AppSecOps platforms and build versus buy. We've got Kunal Bhattacharya, who is head of DevSecOps at American Family Insurance. We've got Ram Lakshmi Narayanan, who is the director of security architecture at Guardant Health, and Pavi Ramamurthy, who is the chief information security officer at Upstart. Three great thought leaders who have gone through it all. So let's go ahead and learn from them around what we can do to build versus buy our AppSecOps platform.
Hello, I have here with me Pavi and Ram, my fellow practitioners in security, and we're going to talk about build versus buy. So these are basically the kind of topics that we hope to cover in this session. So let me start with the standard AppSec portfolio. As you can see, it's a pretty busy slide. It's a bunch of stuff over here, so I'm not going to go through all of that. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is a bunch of different things that we need to do in order to make sure that your code is secure. And this is an ever increasing list. Now, if that much complexity was not scaring you enough, then we have the DevOps capabilities and considerations. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff here that needs to be considered. So when you combine the DevOps and the AppSec portfolio, you have DevSecOps. So it becomes that there's a lot of combination of things that needs to happen and a lot of vendor combinations that is ongoing. So that's how I see the problem statement. And, would like to go to my fellow practitioners to see what are the kind of challenges that you guys see with regards to AppSec. Ram, you want to start with that?
Yeah, thank you. In the past, actually, you tried building an AppSec automation platform where your underlying source applications or the vulnerability scans are different. You have one for open source, one for source code and container scanning. And then the latest one is the pen testing as a service type of tools being available. On the right side of the equation is various development teams that needs to be notified and with their tool of choice, like Jira or other tools. So it's about combining these and having a single pane of glass for someone to look at the vulnerability and how do we assign this to the right team without security teams spending quite a lot of time in going through which projects are owned by which teams, where do we assign and all those things. So this kind of provides one way to automate and gives you the ability to scale your teams.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective, Ram. There is an additional equation here with regards to vendors, and we all have dealt with some of the challenges around that. So Pavi, I wonder if you have had the same challenges and, if you can kind of elaborate on some of that.
Sure. Before we do this, if we can go to your first slide. Yes. So it's a very useful slide, right? So every organization, whether you are in the fintech space like I am, or just a software company, a SaaS company, I highly encourage everyone to kind of make this chart, right? And then plug in your particular solutions in place, whether it's home built or whether it's vendor procured. And this gives you a very good idea of what gaps there are. And so you can say that the IaaS space, like we don't have anything today, but we have something in your SaaS, maybe nothing in your DAST because you don't have an environment that can actually support a DAST testing. You really don't want, you don't want to be testing in staging or production and bring the entire service down, right? So I really, really like this slide, and I would highly encourage anyone who is watching this recording to ensure that they have something like this. Now, having said this, so there is the topic of this conversation is build versus buy. Now let's go to your vendor challenges. And this is not particularly relevant to a company in a particular stage. So this is different for different organizations based on the maturity level, whether you're a startup with like 10 employees or we are a well-established company with 20,000 employees. It all comes down to, especially if you're looking at vendor solutions, it all comes down to who is holding the purse strings and how much money do you get to spend on a solution, right? So before you even spend that money, the challenge is to go and articulate to your management team as to what return on investment that particular solution is bringing in, right? If it was a build, then it's cost, procurement process and whatnot. If it is buy, then it is resources, it's maintenance, it's documentation and training. So regardless of whatever it is, there are challenges. You need to also find out, am I choosing the best solution for my needs? Are there better ones in the industry? Am I doing a one solution fits 80% of my needs, or am I doing 4 solutions that fit 20, 30, 40%? The approach may be different. As you have more solutions in your stack, it becomes that much complex. And now you were talking, Kunal, about the single pane of glass. End of the day, regardless of whatever solutions we have, it's only useful if we do something with the issues that these solutions find, right? And the easiest way for developers or DevOps or any team that is assigned to these issues is if it appears in a way to them that is consumable, whether it's in their sprint board or whether it's in a queue that they can see, and not disparate projects or disparate Jira projects or disparate issues that they don't have a pulse check on. So you're looking for those kind of vendors who will give you that, right? Open source versions is an issue because it may reach end of life. There's no one supporting it. It's got too many bugs because of the fact it's open source. You may even have a regulatory component saying, hey, you may not use open source, but because we don't trust the software as much. And then you need to run your own security scans on the open source for it to be doing security work, right? Sharing data with a vendor is a very, very big challenge. Again, depending on the industry that you're in, are you happy sharing data? What kind of data do they need to ingest to give you that application posture? Is the vendor itself a high-risk vendor? So continuously evaluating the vendor is a problem. And then outside of this, the biggest challenge that I see is developer happiness and developer productivity. If you're not talking to the development team, if you're not understanding what their CI/CD pipeline looks like, what their development release cycle looks like, and you try to bring in a solution that is disruptive, that's a very big blow to your credibility. So understanding requirements, understanding the development environment, bringing in development itself to kind of evaluate these vendors as you go. And I would say doing that bake-off with multiple vendors in the space is, if you're going the buy option, of course, is what has worked for me in earlier companies and in the current.
Hey, thanks, Pavi, for that insight. Definitely, while you were talking, you could probably see my head nodding because all of the challenges that you spoke about kind of resonated with me as well. And it's very interesting you talk about the developer resistance or productivity, because I've had different experiences personally when I try to do the same kind of thing at different organizations. So you really need to understand the culture of the organization before you try to put a solution, because if you don't do that, you end up putting trying to put square peg in a round hole, and definitely not advisable.
And they're going to call you out because anything should go wrong. They automatically think, oh, it's that security solution that was deployed that's causing breakage in our commit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the next thing I want to talk about was if you are considering building some solution, it could be building something and purchasing something, could be a hybrid. But in the end, if you want to be building something, you need to design it properly. What do you, Ram, if you could elaborate on some of the design considerations that would factor into making this decision?
Yeah, thank you. Having tried building this, part of the team that built this kind of platform before, you have two issues. If you're using a legacy vendor tools, you have to make sure that they provide API that is easy for you to integrate. And then if you're using modern tools and stuff, there's open source or commercial, most of them do provide APIs. But then you want to factor in some abstraction layer so that the underlying tool will change. You could be using one tool for open source scanning or container scanning. You could be using another tool as your company goes from a 20% employee to a 2,000, 20,000 people organization. The underlying factors change. So you want to be able to see, can you build an abstraction layer on top to abstract this? The next thing is the UI UX. What is the end user going to see? It's not, you don't want to be building this for an engineer-driven solution. At the end of the day, this output should be consumable by your development team, various stakeholders that are looking at it from a risk perspective, various metrics, compliance metrics. So you have, as you start to add more and more features in it, then that's when you will realize, okay, do I need a 5-10% team to build this? Or should I just spend the time on improving your product and AppSec program and then just subscribe or buy a tool that will do the work for you? So the main considerations are how flexible is your underlying design, how scalable it is to plug into various frameworks and APIs and tools that you're scanning or getting source of vulnerability from. The third thing is, can you normalize the data? Because as CVE gets reported, you are going to get this from various things. Whether you run a container scan at runtime or you're doing a scan on your source code, you are going to get this from various sources. Now, are you going to be creating JIRAs for every library or every CVE number, or are you going to normalize this and make it easier for your developers to consume? And you will see more challenges as you start to deploy this and then say, okay, well, how am I going to maintain this? Yeah.
Hey, Ram, you were talking about the abstraction layer, right? Yeah. So let's say that we, as an organization, we buy a SaaS solution. Or even better yet, we buy a vulnerability management platform solution, right? Yeah. How do you recommend that we build abstraction? And because let's say I'm unhappy with that platform and I want to move to another platform a year down the line, 2 years down the line. So that's a very challenging thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you're talking about, like, if you're buying, let's say, a source code testing or DAS testing or any of those tools, if you're tying your entire process, whether it is Jira or Slack or whatever communication, to that tool, and now if you're going to replace that tool with another one as your organization scales or your underlying development platform, you could have picked up a tool because that is
specific the best technology.
Python,
yeah.
And your development team moved on to Go or whatever, right? So you're not just changing the vulnerability management tool right now, you're now changing the entire process around the company. How do I get the vulnerability down to the development team or to a Slack communication or email, whatever it is? So now you're creating those dependencies. So if you can abstract these two, now you're just managing one tool for your overall portfolio of AppSec. And then the underlying tools can be, you can go with one vendor. There are companies that will say, okay, I will go with one vendor that has everything. And some are open to going best of the breed for each and every type of tools or technology that they use. Yeah,
that's a very interesting comment that you made, Ram, as to going with one vendor providing all solutions versus best of the breed for all. And that's an interesting conversation to have at any organization, because for me personally, I like to consider myself as a purist. So it's always hard to, compromise on the quality of a tool. But yeah, if you are going through with regards to, a single pane of glass, then that is something that you would definitely need to do.
I mean, it does offer for seamless integrations, because within the same organization, I mean, if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, that all these eggs talk to each other, and like you don't need to worry about cross vendor integrations. And it definitely does give you an advantage. At the same time, it definitely offers a disadvantage because one of their product offerings could not be as mature as the others.
Yeah, absolutely. So, before we, talk about design or, build versus buy, I think these are some key considerations that we need to make. Any last thought on the design considerations? Either of you?
These are the critical design. Then other factors like cost and maintenance is the one that you have to keep in mind.
Yeah. So, kind of going to even before you go into the decision, right? There's probably a step before to say whether you're going to build and buy. Pavi, do you want to talk about different considerations that you have before you even go to the stage where you're building or buying?
Yes. See, at a higher level, we talked about cost already on whether you have the resources that you at your disposal to go and procure a solution. But even before we talk about all of this, we take a step back and say, it's a risk-based approach, right? Why are we even buying anything, or why are we even working on any of these? Because there is a risk that we need to address. There is a gap. So understanding what risks you have in your AppSec program and whether it's going to be solved, build versus buy comes much later, right? So understanding what the risks are and then clearly outlining what the requirements are for any solution, whether it's built in-house or whether you are buying the solution, clearly articulating the requirements that you're looking for in that solution. Then asking like kind of a few key questions, which is, hey, out there in the market, is there a solution which clearly addresses all my requirements? Like, can I just go and buy this because I needed A, B, C? This solution has A, B, C, and D. So does another solution, in which case you do a bake-off, right? And then one of the main reasons that we often think about buying solutions is to kind of transfer risk transference or shift the risk, right? So we almost say that, well, we have a great AppSec program, but then we, for this particular thing, we looked at this vendor and the vendor did not highlight this to us. Hence, we were not aware of it. So as an organization, we need to understand with the build model or with a buy model, there is either a risk tolerance and acceptance or a risk transference. So that needs to be very clearly articulated, right? And the third we talked about was kind of, are we comfortable as an organization to hand over this much data, whether it's sensitive for that vendor to perform that, right? So all of these are considerations before you come to these kind of governing factors. How much is it going to cost me? Whether is it money or whether is it resources if I build it, right? Where is it going to be? Is it going to be on the cloud, which is where now everyone is going towards, or is it going to be on-prem, right? And who is admin? Like understanding how that solution is going to be used, right? And then talking about things like, what does it mean in terms of integrations? How many other systems does it need to integrate? Does it have the connector? So asking all of those questions prior, if you have a vulnerability management platform and then you're looking at an SCA or a SaaS tool, which does not offer that connection between these two, it's kind of too late once you have purchased two solutions, right? So then the maintenance, the last part of it is the, keeping the lights on or business as usual. Once you've deployed the solution, then what happens? How do you maintain it? How do you patch it? What happens if it's a cloud solution, if it's a SaaS offering, they just update it on the back end, and then all of a sudden everything breaks because this particular SaaS just put a new rule in place, right? So, all of these things have happened, to us in various stages where we then say, oh, we never turned on that rule. Oh, there was a vendor update that we did not know. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you used my favorite word, which is bake off. This is something that I keep reiterating everywhere I go. And sometimes that doesn't make me popular, but what it is. And also, there's another factor to consider here, which is, any organization, the environment keeps changing, right? Like, for example, you're at a fast growing phase or you're at a steady state phase where you're, but want or rather have aspirations to grow. And you do that by, M&As. And, if you do that, then you have the complexity of the existing environment, and you're basically inheriting other organizations' environment and culture. Ram, in your experience, how do you see changing organization environments? Do you see that factoring in to this decision at all?
Yes. Usually people think that, okay, this is stable and we can control what programming languages people are using, what tech stack they're using. That's not usually the case. Usually within between 1 to 3 years, a lot of changes happen. But let's keep aside M&A. That's something not anyone controls. It happens from various other factors. But the tech stacks, frameworks, the underlying tools, everything changes very fast. So if your security team is not keeping up with this, if you're building this on your own, then you are now becoming a bottleneck. So the question you want to ask yourself is, can we keep up with the underlying changes to make sure that the AppSec platform can scale? Or do we need to subscribe to a tool from outside? The other changes are the business needs will also change. You might be a company, you're not looking at any compliance need today, and a year from now, you're looking at some kind of a compliance need, whether it's external or internally started. So as you start selling you could be a completely technology product, and as you start selling into regulated environment, you have to look at those angles as well. So there are a lot of things that goes that are not predictable just by looking at it from a pure technology standpoint. And this is when you want to think about, as people who have done this before will know that, okay, this is going to change unless you have a staff team backed up to support this. You want to look at it realistically, set the expectation with everyone. Well, we don't have the budget to buy, we're going to build, but this is what we're going to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually brings us to a very important thing, which is in vogue these days, which is around application security, posture management. And, Ram, you talked a little bit around single pane of glass. Are there tools out there which actually let you do this, to have a single pane of glass where you can get an entire view of your AppSec portfolio, and what you have?
Yes, there are several different tools available. It can be a single vendor tool that gives you the similar thing. It can be a multi-vendor, and you have one product that can look at various tools, whether it is Armor Code or Apiro or any other tools. The question you want to look at it is, do you have the connectors built into your tech stack and platform? And does it do the job that we are doing for your environment? That's the first thing. Second thing is, in terms of looking at the metrics or the outputs that comes out of it, whether it is integration with Jira or kind of having a dashboard for not just looking at, usually people look at vulnerabilities as what people are not doing, but you also want to look at how people are progressively making progress over a period of time. As they close issues, you want to highlight the facts that these are security wins rather than people not doing the right things.
See, to Ram's point, right? As I said, it's great, whether you're building or buying, and then you have a list of all of these issues. It's totally irrelevant if no one is fixing those. It's totally irrelevant if you're not pushing to fix those issues, if you don't have clearly defined SLAs. So picking a single pane of glass platform that works for your organization's needs, and then having that continuous traction throughout that life cycle of that issue to help the developers understand why that is important for them to fix, and for them to fix it within the SLA. Because I think Kunal or Ram, one of you mentioned that the landscape changes. You may become regulated, or you may have to show audit evidence on compliance, on SLA adherence and whatnot, right? So building it from the very beginning makes it very seamless and very effortless for your software engineering organization to then say, okay, this is just part of my everyday work and not a special thing that I'm doing for security.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Having posture management tool in place just makes all of our jobs easier. And that is something that we're definitely looking at. I don't know if you guys had a chance to use any of the platforms, but I know that I'm going to try something out and have a bake-off maybe. I don't know. Well, thanks for this interesting discussion, Bhavi and Ram. I think we're almost in closing. Any last thoughts?
No, we can talk about this for hours. We all have opinions and thoughts. So 20 minutes is not enough time to bring all our, but for folks listening to the conversation, hit us up, I think, during live chat when we play this, or reach out to us and we are more than happy to answer questions.